This woman found a massive hole in her backyard. When she learned what was inside, she was shocked. Marissa and her nephew were getting ready to walk the dog when they heard a low rumble coming from behind the house. As they stepped onto the grass, the ground suddenly gave way, splitting open and revealing a huge hole right in the backyard. Her brother shouted at her to stay away, but Marissa ignored him and moved closer. Neighbors started gathering, watching as she tied a rope around her waist and slowly climbed into the hole. Seconds turned into minutes. Then finally her voice echoed back up. "It's way deeper than it looks." People leaned in. When Marissa finally emerged, her face was pale and her eyes wide with fear. All she could say was, "There's something down there." The entire neighborhood stood still as Marissa stood beside the massive hole, her breath short and shallow. Her jeans were covered in dust, her hands scraped, and her eyes, those wide, stunned eyes, refused to blink. She kept glancing back at the dark pit behind her, as if something inside it might follow her out. No one dared speak, not even her brother, who had been yelling for her just moments earlier. The silence was heavier than the ground that had collapsed beneath them. Her nephew clutched her sleeve and whispered, "What did you see?" But Marissa didn't answer. She slowly walked toward the house, sat on the porch steps, and stared at the dirt on her boots like it might start moving again. Finally, someone called the local fire department. Within 15 minutes, red lights flickered down the street, and responders began taping off the yard. The chief approached Marissa gently, crouching beside her, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" She shook her head no. "Do you know what caused the hole?" She looked him straight in the eyes and said, "It's not natural." That phrase was enough to start whispers. Not natural? What did she mean? A gas line explosion? A cave-in? But Marissa hadn't smelled gas. She hadn't seen broken pipes or loose rock. What she had seen down there had made her heart freeze mid-beat. The firemen lowered a drone into the hole, expecting a simple view of rock layers or a collapsed septic system. But as the drone descended, the signal flickered, and then dead. The screen went black. One of the men muttered, "Could be interference." Another one said, "Or something deeper." That night, the backyard glowed under floodlights, and Marissa couldn't sleep. She kept replaying what she'd seen, how the air had shifted the deeper she went. The temperature dropped unnaturally. The walls weren't just dirt, they looked carved. Not by nature, but by hands, or claws, or something in between. Smooth edges, strange grooves, and one shape she couldn't stop thinking about. A circle, perfectly round, set into the side of the earth with symbols etched around it like some kind of door. Around midnight, her brother knocked on her bedroom door. "Marissa," he said, "someone's in the yard." They looked out the window and saw a man kneeling by the hole, wearing a black jacket and a headlamp. When they rushed outside, he was gone. Only faint boot prints left behind. No one recognized the tracks. The next morning, a van pulled up. It wasn't from the county. It was unmarked. Two men in suits stepped out and asked to speak with Marissa privately. "We're part of the State Geological Survey," one of them claimed, but their shoes were too clean, their hands too soft. They didn't ask about rock formations. They asked, "Did you touch anything, and how far did you go down?" Marissa lied. She said she only looked. They left without another word. But later that night, she confessed the truth to her brother. She had gone much deeper than she let on. At least 40 feet. The air got thicker, colder, like walking into a sealed tomb. She saw markings on the walls, old and deep. She heard a sound that didn't echo like the wind. It pulsed, rhythmic like a heartbeat. And she saw something metallic half buried in the wall. Not rusty, not old, clean, smooth, something with edges too precise to be natural. He asked her why she didn't tell anyone. She said because I wasn't supposed to find it. 2 days later, they heard heavy machinery outside. An official work crew had arrived. They said they were going to secure the area for safety, but no one from the city had issued the order. The workers wouldn't answer questions. They started putting up fences with black tarps. They brought in scanners, metal detectors, and noise sensors. Neighbors were told to stay inside. One night, Marissa snuck out and crawled behind one of the tarps. What she saw made her knees buckle. The hole was wider now, excavated, and inside it lights had been strung. Generators hummed softly, and men in protective suits stood near a large silver object embedded in the earth. It looked like a hatch, round, smooth, with 6 symmetrical grooves surrounding it. She stared at it for as long as she could, until one of the lights turned and nearly caught her in its beam. She backed away and ran, heart pounding, lungs aching. When she got home, she didn't speak. She didn't sleep. All she could think was whatever was under her backyard, it had been buried a long, long time, and someone had been waiting to uncover it. 3 more days passed. Helicopters appeared. Military-style trucks rolled through the neighborhood at dawn. Residents were told to evacuate for geological risk assessment. Some resisted, others packed quickly. Marissa refused to leave, but when her brother went outside the next morning, she was gone. Her phone, wallet, and keys were still in her room. The backyard was completely fenced off now. No sign of her, no note, just the faint hum of the generators running deep underground. He reported her missing, but the officers just nodded politely and said she was probably just stressed. They didn't search. They didn't ask questions. 2 days later, her brother received a package with no return address. Inside was a small notebook, Marissa's handwriting. It described what she saw below: a structure, metal walls, faint glowing lights embedded in stone. She described symbols, some like spirals, others like stars, and on the last page she wrote, "I think it's a vessel, a door to something older than we are. If I go missing, tell the world it was never just a hole." Her brother took the notebook to a local reporter, who agreed to look into it. But that same night, the reporter's office was broken into. Only one thing was taken: the notebook. Weeks passed. The site in the backyard was sealed with concrete. The trucks left. The fences were taken down. Grass was planted. No one talked about it again. Marissa never came back. Some say she's underground, deeper than anyone's dared to go. Others say she found a way into something meant to stay closed. Her brother still sits on the porch at night, staring at that smooth patch of grass, listening, because sometimes just after midnight, he swears he hears something beneath the ground. Not movement, not machinery, breathing, soft, slow, and alive.